Hello.
Hello. So nice to meet you properly. And your outfit. So I'm in the yellow and you're in pink.
I messaged Ali earlier saying, and I thought it was something like, normally I will just check with people saying like, oh, is there any particular colour you want me to wear? And I was fully expecting you to be like, no, like wear whatever you want, and you didn't. You were like getting into like, no, actually, do you know what? Do you have any yellow? Oh, actually, pink. No, pink. Let's go pink.
I love it. Yeah, no, my two favourite colours are pink and yellow. And if you, any of my friends and my whole family and boyfriend will say, I really never wear black or any like grey colours. I love colour.
Brilliant.
But at the moment it's very boring. Blue scrubs on the hospital wards, which I'm not a fan of. But I can't pick everything.
I mean, blue scrubs, they have their own kind of power about them, because it's really important to kind of I think costume and kind of having that ability to change from like home life to work life, or from persona to persona, can be really helpful. And blue scrubs is basically like they're the best people who wear scrubs. So
well, that's very positive and nice to hear, but no, I do know what you mean. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I know we've been chatting about this for ages, and I've just been so inspired from reading about you to listening to you, and yeah, just can't wait to really get into this conversation tonight, especially as even though we're going to go way beyond the spectrum of eating disorders, it is Eating Disorders Awareness Week. And awareness weeks are a strange thing, because we should be having these conversations all the time, which is what you do as a mental health campaigner and what I hope to do. But yeah, if you could just start off by introducing yourself to everyone, I'm sure more and more people will trickle in.
Sure. Although do remind me about awareness weeks. I'll come back to awareness weeks. And also it is Eating Disorders Awareness Week. It's also British Pie Week. So I feel like the calendar is trolling us, to be honest, at the moment. Right, so my name is Juliette Burton. Follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on Twitch and all of the places, really. But so I'm a comedian. I'm a comedian by night, mental health campaigner and consultant and trainer by day. And I have sold out at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival 4 years in a row. I've won some awards at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and a couple of other different festivals around the UK. Brighton Fringe, Bedford Fringe also gave me an award. I didn't realise they had awards, but I love them. Anything that involves a bed is good. Then I've also toured in Australia 3 years out there, and had sold out shows there. Toured in New Zealand as well, the International Comedy Festival out there. And I've it's summing my career up first. I also do voiceover work, but mainly comedy. I did a UK national tour in 2018, and then I was on my second UK national tour, Arts Council funded, at the beginning of 2020, and that was a bigger false start than a marriage to Elizabeth Taylor, to be honest. So unfortunately we kept rearranging, and then it hasn't happened. It went virtual a little bit, but then not quite. I perform comedy. I've been performing comedy for years, which I'm sure that we'll talk a bit more about. Talk a bit about my mental health history in most of my shows, because I think comedy is a great way of breaking down the barriers and increasing understanding, because if we're laughing together, then we all feel less alone and less afraid. Then in terms of mental health, I can tell you, should I talk about that, or should I carry on?
Yeah, so you can go straight into it. I was gonna ask you to start your kind of to start the conversation around where it all began for you, and if you could just tell everyone a little bit about your background. I know it is pretty extensive, and we don't have all the time in the world, which I wish we did, but if you can just give as much information as you can about your history with mental illness and when it all began for you.
For sure. It's like going to a GP's consultation, when you're like, okay, let's quickly, got 10 minutes to talk about.
I had GP consultation skills practice today, because I'm on my GP placement at the moment, so that might also be the frame of mind I'm in. But no, we've got way more time than that.
I love it. I mean, I'm happy to stay around to chat with you. I'm already enjoying this so much more than any other conversation I've had today.
That's great. That's what we want to be, you know. We're hardly socialising at the moment. May as well entertain everyone else, educate everyone else, and yeah.
Well, it might sound like faint praise, but I'll be honest, I spent a whole hour with a dog. So, you know, dogs are amazing, and this conversation is better than that. So we're doing well. So yeah, I in terms of mental health, to keep it in a nutshell, because nuts are very regularly talked about when we're talking about mental health. I mean, we could start with my first diagnosis.
Yeah.
So my first diagnosis was when I was 14, and that was anorexia. Happy Eating Disorders Awareness Week. Um, so that was my first diagnosis. But looking back, having done lots and lots of therapy, inpatient and outpatient treatment, there were lots of underlying mental health conditions that hadn't been diagnosed, which we'll come on to in a sec. But the first diagnosis was age 14, anorexia. And that then continued throughout my teenage years. I fell out of education because of it. I've been an inpatient twice for anorexia. The first time was voluntarily. The second time I was actually sectioned under the Mental Health Act because I was a month away from dying of anorexia, and I spent my 18th birthday sectioned under the Mental Health Act in hospital. But then my sister spent her 18th birthday drunk under a table in Wetherspoons. So I actually think I had the better venue of the two of us. I spent my 18th birthday section for anorexia. I also, in between those two, between 14 and 17, I had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, some of the things that were underlying the anorexia that hadn't been kind of unearthed. And then after being sectioned, about a year and a half later, about a year later, I struggled with agoraphobia and paranoia. When I was sectioned as well, I had with the stress of being sectioned to me having a psychosis. So I had audible and visual hallucinations for about half of the time that I was already in hospital for anorexia, being treated for that. I was having audible and visual hallucinations, which was it was the kind of thing that most people get when they go to Glastonbury, but mine was a lot less fun.
A bad trip, yeah.
A bit more horror movie, a bit less trippy, chilled out for me, and also the nurses treating me. More than happy to talk way openly about all of this, by the way. So ask any questions you
we're going to unpick lots of what you've discussed.
Very too. But to finish it off, she says arrogantly, as if she's never going to be diagnosed with any other condition ever again. I then went from a size. Well, I don't want to say sizes because some people might find that problematic. But I struggled very quickly. It was like a light switch kind of switched. I went from restrictive eating to binge eating disorder, and I was eating at all hours of the day and night, and I was passing out from the pain of eating. And if anyone's paying attention, binge eating disorder is the theme of Eating Disorders Awareness Week 2021. So I've got a problem with the idea that every year we've got themes, but I'll come back to that as well. Started getting therapy for that, and it was again inpatient. I became suicidal because of that kind of switch between anorexia and binge eating disorder. It was all about identity, and I made some attempts on my life during that time, and then went back into inpatient treatment again. Tried the NHS inpatient treatment due to the suicidal attempts, and then also went into a different clinic for binge eating addiction, and then I had a period of kind of ongoing therapy that started to there's something started changing, and then I had a period of kind of semi-recovery. It was quite good, and then I struggled with bulimia, and that was in the middle of my 20s. Although obviously I'm only 21, but ageism is also a problem. So actually, do you know what? I'm 36 and I'm proud of it, because I've survived, and all of my mental illnesses have helped me survive all the deep-seated distress, emotional distress, the emotional thoughts and feelings that I couldn't handle. Actually, mental illnesses come about sometimes to help us survive. They want to protect us in an unhealthy way, but like they are there for that reason. And then recently I've been diagnosed with, so in the last sort of 5 years, I've been diagnosed with separation anxiety disorder, body dysmorphic disorder, and also complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So to run through all of the diagnoses very quickly, They are anorexia, anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder. Oh, I didn't mention that. Bipolar disorder, body dysmorphic disorder, bulimia, compulsive overeating disorder, that's binge eating disorder, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, which is why this list is organized alphabetically. Also, I've had somebody in my gigs like start cheering. There was this guy at the back of the room that started cheering when I said obsessive compulsive disorder, and I was like, wow, we've got a fan of OCD. OCD, OCD, OCD.
That is one way to normalize it. Cheer, why not?
Then we've got so obsessive compulsive disorder, then psychotic hallucinations, paranoia, agoraphobia, separation anxiety disorder, which is why I very rarely let people leave my gigs ever. So let's see if I let you leave, Ali, at the end of this call. And then I also have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which actually is what I've been working on a lot in the last couple of years. And the way that I kind of see it is like CPTSD is like the roots to me of the tree that developed with all of my other diagnoses. So like as a child, I now recognize that I had bipolar disorder, which involved kind of depression and anxiety disorder. And then out of those kind of feelings, developed these other little, not little branches, but huge life-threatening illnesses, but they're all sort of connected to this root of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is different to PTSD, but I'm sure that we can chat about that. So that sounds like me in a nutshell. I've been in therapy for 20 years, which some people might think is infantilization, and I think it's actually much more empowering to be able to go to therapy, have that time to process the trauma. Like there's multiple traumas in my past that I'm still processing, and also dealing with the world that we're living in right now, and dealing with our thoughts and feelings, having that hour to talk to somebody honestly about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being so open and honest and sharing all of that. I guess my first question would be to you, because you've given such an informed, alphabetical, which I like, list of your diagnoses. So my first question would be to you, how do you feel about the labels? How do you feel about talking about I have all these diagnoses, and how do you feel about actually having acquired them? Has it helped you in terms of seeking the right treatment for the right course of action, or has it disempowered you in ways? I'm thinking, there's a bit of nuance to it, so you can elaborate.
For sure. So I did a whole show about labels.
I saw.
Yeah, that was called Defined, because I do, especially in comedy, like quite often I felt like I was defined as a mental health comedian, and I was like, I didn't realize that was a genre of comedy. But like that isn't everything that is who I am. So I was exploring in that show the fact that labels sometimes can help us. They can sometimes help give us the language with which we can talk about the conditions that we're struggling with. And I've observed that with some friends who've recently been diagnosed with depression. It gives them that language to talk about what it is they're feeling, and there's a name. And sometimes it's really helpful to say that's what that is. Then it's also really, it can be hindering. It can be difficult when people only see the label and that's all they see. Like it can be really difficult when somebody has a kind of a stigma about, and they're coming to the conversation with you that is full of misconceptions about that label, and they're not willing to engage with you about what it's like for you and what that means. I've noticed somebody's asking, what's that on my face? It's glitter. When I perform, I put a lot of glitter on to remind me that firstly, it's the kind of the transformation. A lot of comedians wear a certain look, and for me, glitter is the thing. So yeah, that's what I'm wearing.
It's very Glastonbury. I like it.
I'm trying to get the festival vibe going, even if Edinburgh Fringe isn't currently happening. I'm still trying to feel the festival vibe.
Yeah. So you were saying that it's limiting for if people come to you with that kind of stigmatization around the certain label, but on the other side of it, what would you say it's?
I think that as in like the helpful side of it, I think it does give us the language. Like if once you get diagnosed with the right diagnosis, then you're able to then sort of understand what it is you're feeling, why you're reacting. Like when I got diagnosed with CPTSD, for example, that was a huge moment for me of, I now understand why it is that I have anxiety spikes that mean that I can't think clearly, and I can't because of the trauma. If it's an experience that is re-traumatizing or is bringing up similar feelings or experiences to those initial traumas that I experienced when I was a child, then I find my thoughts get incredibly confused.
Mm-hmm.
And before I just thought it was me being strange, and then suddenly you get
Yeah,
the diagnosis, and I go, oh, okay, I can be a bit more compassionate to myself.
totally.
This makes sense. This is psychologically speaking. There's a roadmap through this. I hate now that word's
I
ruined.
know. I find that word very triggering myself. Everyone else is like in the hospital not wanting to use it either.
For sure.
Um, no, okay. Well, that does make a lot of sense. And I thought about it in terms of I'm very interested in child and adolescent psychiatry, and I know for a lot of children with learning difficulties and developmental disorders like autism, if they don't get diagnosed, they then don't get the care and the one-to-one teaching aid at school. So actually sometimes diagnoses, because of the way our healthcare system and social system work, leads to that extra support. And but at the same time, I can understand how perhaps some people view the medical profession and psychiatry as over medicalizing emotional problems. So I wanted to know your kind of views on that kind of level of the over medicalization.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important thing to bring up because I do feel like it's easy to hide behind labels sometimes. So letting it own you, a bit like with makeup, you know, you can choose to wear makeup if it empowers you, but it isn't, you don't have to wear makeup to be empowered. So it's that slight nuance of that if the label helps you to explain to somebody what it is you're going through, then that's a useful language, because language is clunky, and language regarding mental illness can be really problematic. You know, with people saying that they have anxiety when actually what they mean is they are anxious,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and people saying that they have depression and they mean they're a bit sad and they don't have clinical depression.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the other thing I experienced, you could talk about being in the sort of children's care of mental health and that aspect. When I got diagnosed in my teens, like there were a few years where I got shoved with loads of different labels that at the time I was young, you know, I was between the ages of 14 and 17. I got the majority of my diagnoses, and it was really hard because it was like I don't understand any of these things. I'm not in charge of my care. Nobody seems to be talking to me from a place that I can actually have a good rapport with, or ask questions, or be in charge of how things progress, like in my treatment. I just felt completely powerless. And at the same time, a lot of people were adding their own projected stigma onto those labels, like that anorexia was just attention seeking. I just want to make it clear that all mental illnesses are not attention seeking, but performing comedy, that definitely is.
Well said. And so just to backtrack to your teenage days where you got diagnosed with anorexia, and to the stigma you experienced, especially with your school, and the fact that you weren't welcome back and it was viewed as some sort of contagious illness. Can you talk a little bit about that, and how, you know, hopefully times have changed now, but how did that make you feel then? And did you have any strength within you to kind of want to fight back at the time, or was it something that you just had to walk away from and find another option?
Honestly, it was something, I mean, I felt incredibly alone. And the further down the road of this kind of firstly getting diagnosed, and then there's a lot of stigma attached to it, and then being hospitalized, and then not my first hospitalization, that was when my school said, don't come back, like not to me, to my parents, to my mother specifically. And I again just felt like I was powerless. Well, that wasn't my choice. Why couldn't I go back to be with my friends and carry on my education at a time that having stability could have been a really important part of the
Yeah.
rehabilitation process. So even what ended up happening, I, looking back, think, if I'm being honest with myself, was that kind of increased exclusion and confusion, and there were some other things happening in my family at the time that also kind of added to this kind of stressed kind of isolation. It meant that I turned towards my illnesses more. I turned certainly towards the anorexia way more like than I ever did before. And it was to me at the time it felt like a solution to
Mhm.
all of this. Like at least that was the one thing that I knew felt good and felt like I could access and I could feel it wasn't empowered, but it felt powerful. It felt like a resistance, and it
Like
felt like,
a purpose. It was, you were goal driven, yeah.
and I felt like I didn't have a voice, and
Mm.
it felt like that cutting off my voice. It was similar to, but it isn't a hunger strike.
Yeah.
There was so much else going on, and it isn't as simplistic as a hunger strike. It is an illness. But it certainly was a lot about empowerment, and I know that finding my voice, naming my experiences, naming my emotions, my needs, is still something that I struggle with, but it has,
Mm-hmm.
especially doing comedy, has been not that I, it's been very helpful for me. I would not recommend it for everybody. That is not a course of
Thick
treatment.
skin.
I only talk in my comedy about stuff that I've already dealt with in therapy. So there has to be a healthy boundary there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, if we can just talk about your experience of being sectioned, if you can just tell us what it felt like, what were your preconceptions before you got sectioned? Did you know what it was as a young teenager, what the definition of being sectioned was? Had you seen it anywhere in film and media? So, what were your thoughts? What were your thoughts before and then during when you were inside? Yeah.
So I was sectioned when I was 17. I'd been in a couple of different sixth form colleges after my school had effectively excluded me for having a mental illness. Um, they, I
Ridiculous,
thank
honestly. It makes me feel so sick because that is what I want to do with I think the mental health care right now for school children isn't good enough, but to think that it was at that extreme level that you actually excluded, it's sickening. But
thank you. And on behalf of my mother, who I remember,
painful. It's really
my mother's not somebody she's not very comfortable with her own anger.
yeah.
Um, but I remember, when your mother, if or somebody that you know who doesn't really show anger, and you're like, you get that vibe from them of, oh,
Dad's
then
very angry. Yeah, when someone calm cracks, you're like, yeah, they really care about this issue.
she didn't even crack. She just had that kind of energy, kind of exceeding of, whoa, don't mess with her.
Understandable. It's
Yeah, for sure.
absolutely outrageous, but
Um, when I was sectioned, I mean, firstly, I was very, very ill
mm,
and physically very underweight. Um, so there's a lot of brain chemistry stuff that goes on when you're in that physical chemical state.
mm,
Like there's lots of studies that have been done on mainly on people who were in concentration camps actually,
yeah.
and had the starvation kind of from that sort of change. It changes the way you think in on a molecular level. I'm not a scientist. Those aren't the right words, but it does.
Mhm.
There's certain things that change that are hard to reverse without the healthy weight gain that comes with treatment. Um, Before I was sectioned, I remember seeing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was thinking of exactly.
So
Mhm.
we watched that at school, and I loved English, and we watched it in English, and I loved English so much that even a month before I got sectioned under the Mental Health Act, I took my AS levels, and I mean, it was a month before a section. I was very, very unwell. I still got an A for my English, and I still got 100% in my Shakespeare paper. So me and Shakespeare, we just get
Buddies,
each.
buddies. Well,
Yeah.
that is phenomenal, an absolute testament to your wonderful brain. And now
Oh,
you're
bless you. Thank you.
comedy.
Thank you. I now feel quite. I wish I had you as a teacher. Yeah. I'd only really experienced that idea of yeah, even just mental health generally. So the idea of being an inpatient in hospital was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Um, I've since watched a couple of other films that I think deal with it a lot better. But when I was a kid, like there was talk about, we think that maybe there was an uncle that died because of we don't talk about him, and have later found out that actually he took his own life.
Mm,
So it was that kind of conversation where mental health wasn't really a thing. My one of my cousins had struggled with anorexia as well, but we didn't talk about it. And at school there were, there wasn't really the pastoral care at the school that I then got excluded effectively from. And it just wasn't really a conversation. It was kind of the pull your socks up, get over it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all in your head. Well, yes, it is effectively all in your head, but that still means it's real for you. I think that in terms of the time leading up to being sectioned, I was pretty unaware of what was happening. And when I was told told that I was going to be sectioned that day, I'd had some warning from the GP a couple of weeks earlier, because I've been seeing the GP every week just to take bloods, check my heart rate, because it was that kind of crisis moment of my heart could give out. And I'm trying not to sensationalize that story, because I feel like that's one of the big pitfalls with talking about any mental illness, but especially anorexia, is the sensationalization of it, rather than talking about the reality, and also without triggering anybody, the how to turn towards solutions, rather than sensationalizing. Because I think sensationalizing it means that more people are encouraged towards it in a way. Certainly the anorexia minx kind of whispers on my shoulder quite a lot with when I see stories about it. But to answer your question, sorry, my mind wanders a lot. So, but during lockdown, it's the only exercise I'm getting, so that's fine. I think that when I was told that I was going to be sectioned, I didn't really know what that meant. And I don't remember it being explained to me other than that I had no choice but to follow the instructions. And as invincible as the illness had made me feel, because when you're underweight and anorexia is whispering to you, it does make you feel like you could take on the world and you've got superhuman strength. Even I knew that, like, okay, well, I'm a good girl, so, because good girl syndrome's wrapped up in it as well. Because I'm a good girl, I'll go along with what they've told me. I guess I should, but I don't really understand what everyone's making a fuss about. Yeah. And looking back now, I can absolutely see that, yeah, I was, if it weren't for that, the NHS sectioning me, I wouldn't have, I'm fairly sure I wouldn't have survived. So I'm very relieved. And that's what I always think, whenever I crack a joke in my sets that doesn't get a great response. I still think, yeah, but I didn't die. It's good though.
That was a great thing to fall back on.
So yeah, I think that the image of what it means to be sectioned, I still think people have that idea of men in white coats. Yeah, straight jackets, men in white coats coming to grab the kind of half human crazed lunatic, dragged into the back of the ambulance. And it was very mundane. The process, I mean, it was traumatic, but it was the process of it was fairly kind of polite. I mean, even
so you did feel like it was humane. You did feel like you were treated as a person, and as far as all of that went in terms of getting from A to B.
In terms of the being section, so the actual, you are now being taken away from your ambulance, that was all very English country garden almost. Like I remember my mum sitting in the back of the ambulance with me, and with my suitcase, and she was talking to the paramedic about the Queen's Jubilee. I think it was the Diamond Jubilee, one of the Jubilees that year. And I remember her talking about how nice the roses were, and I was like, this is bizarre. But then when I was in hospital, that was when I felt the stress building. Like, it was very confusing for me why I was on bed rest, why they took away my tweezers, my nail scissors, my shoelaces, my headphones. They took away my phone, took away magazines and books. And I was like, I don't understand why you're doing this. And I don't know whether it was down to the low body weight, meaning that I have a poor memory of it, or whether it was because they didn't explain it to me. But I remember feeling very frustrated. I was being wheeled everywhere in a wheelchair as well, and I wasn't being left alone. So I was on 24-hour obs, that's 24-hour obs all day, every day. Of course, that's what 24 hours means. And I was used to that in the first hospital that I was hospitalized in. I was in a room that was it was called the Goldfish Bowl, because you had like a window into the room from the nurses' station, so they could always keep an eye on you. In the hospital where I was sectioned, we just had a chair by the door where a nurse would always sit and watch. And some of them were nice, but it was always a bit of a coin toss. And actually, when you got to a further stage of treatment, those were the nurses that were actually the nurses and the doctors that were really, I really liked. Like, they
Yeah.
taught you like a proper person. But those first few weeks, for some reason, the nurses that were put on that 24-hour obs, honestly, they sometimes treated me with, at best, tolerance, and at worst,
Yeah.
contempt. And that was part of what I believe led me to earlier.
I think what you've touched upon is so important, and it's, you know, the human relationships with hospital staff and patients are so conducive to recovery. You can have all the fancy medications in the world, but, you know, if the trust isn't there from nurse to patient, doctor to patient, and if the good kind of rapport isn't there, it really can be a bit detrimental to your experience and, you know, be quite traumatic in itself, you know. So I think it's really interesting that you touched upon that. What I wanted to draw upon as well is I read somewhere that you have drawn similarities between COVID lockdown and being a psych inpatient. So I just wanted you to elaborate a bit on that, and what made you kind of think to use that as a kind of comparison, because that's really, really powerful. But obviously they're different, but I can completely understand the thought process.
So they are very different, and that's, thank you for clarifying that. Also, I had to just slightly change where I was because my phone needed to charge.
Don't
Um,
worry.
I think the biggest similarity is that when we come out of this, or when things start easing, there are going to be similarities with the kind of rehabilitation that you get after being a psych patient. So the things that have been healthy and helpful for me in the past, of like having a good routine, having good socialization, having creative activities, having purpose. All of those things are really healthy, healthy things to help our mental well-being. And there's also having that kind of structure and rehabilitation of getting back into the world and becoming a part of society again.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was coming out of inpatient treatment, I'd always be given sort of tasks to kind of check off, and they included things like reintroducing socialization, reintroducing like friendship circles,
Yeah.
And taking it step by step. But there could have been a lot of better aftercare. I think I had 3 meetings with a CPN after being sectioned, and that wasn't enough, to be honest. It would have been much better to have had regular meetings and really worked on the practicalities of getting back out into the world and having a job, getting back to education, and identifying who you are. I think the other similarities with lockdown is, I think that you have a lot of time with no healthy distractions. You have to sit alone with your thoughts a lot more, and alone with your feelings as well. And it's difficult to be able to manage that without relying on unhealthy behaviors. If you're somebody who struggles to sit with their feelings, that's certainly a back
Yeah.
to all of my eating disorders, for sure.
And a lot of other people I've spoken to, you know, the root often seems when you're a young child, because we're not taught around resilience and how to deal with difficult emotions. We find either positive coping mechanisms of how to distract and take us away from them, or negative coping mechanisms. So, you know, whether it's self-harm or developing an eating disorder, the attention is away from your difficult emotions. And it's really fascinating that that's what, you know, we do to compensate, so that we don't have to feel, you know, something uncomfortable just for a bit.
For sure. And actually, that's been a big thing for my experience of lockdown, has been to really confront the ability to sit and feel, and not try to deflect, either with humor or with my unhealthy behaviors. I'll be honest, the beginning of lockdown last year, I really was tempted to go back towards anorexia. And I remember it was that minx was there full on, and the bulimia as well, they were full on, just more so than they had been for years.
Mm.
And the choice that I had to make in the end, was, which I know it wasn't perfect, but and it's an ongoing journey of recovery, but I ended up working harder and doing more reading to take some time to be like, okay, well, it's make or break time now. Like, if this is this difficult, then I really need to confront this and try some new stuff. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So that's a therapy phrase, but another way of phrasing that would be, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So during that time, if I was feeling so much discomfort around my feelings and I was so drawn to those unhealthy behaviors, then I needed to try. I've got a toolbox. I've got a kind of.
Yeah.
I've
heard you use the phrase your holistic mental health care utility belt.
Yeah,
and I like that. So can you tell us what you do? Because I'm sure it'd be so helpful for everyone listening who's struggling in lockdown, whatever their struggles are. What are your things that you have in your utility belt?
Cool. So I hope I can remember all of them, but maybe I'll go on Instagram later and try to sum up a few more if I forget them. But yeah, I kind of imagine it being a bit like a plumber's tool belt, that you can kind of pick and choose different things, and sometimes one thing will work and another time another thing will work. There can be simple things like talking to friends, having proper discussing my fears and concerns with friends I trust. It could be distracting myself with some really fun stuff, like getting creative or doing something fun. It could be it could be a proper meditation. I hate meditation. I prefer moving meditation. So I like running, which again, I used to over exercise as part of my so it's making sure that it's balanced and being honest with myself about, like, am I taking enough rest days, and am I pushing my body too far? But being able to be tuned into my body a bit more, and try to sit with those feelings as well and listen to what my body is saying, is for me. I like the guided runs that kind of combine meditation with running. It could be there's also just taking time outside and outdoors in nature. I know it sounds a bit wishy-washy, but
no, it's not wishy-washy at all. That's honestly like what I'm the co-founder of the organisation NutriTag, and we're really trying to teach exactly this to medical students and junior doctors. So it's not wishy-washy at all. It's so important. Connecting with green space is shown to really improve mental health, reduce blood pressure. So everything you're saying actually is evidence-based.
It's also like moving your body, just getting motivated, having playlists that change my mood. I think that music is one of the healthiest mood altering substances that we can use. Being able to, speaking of mood altering substances, food is a mood altering substance. Absolutely. So making sure that I look at what I'm eating. Am I eating a varied diet? Am I having regular meals? Am I having fun with food as well? Like, am I trying new things? Because it's very easy for me to get back into that kind of restrictive, minimizing, or like the same safe foods, and that could have easily been something that happened. But having joy through cooking has been really helpful.
Do you find that in itself quite meditative, like joy in cooking, and it's creative?
It can be, but I'll be honest.
You out at times as well.
I'll be honest. So I'm doing cooking streaming every Saturday on Twitch, and it's reminded me that I do get very stressed. I get incredibly stressed when I'm cooking, but I also really love it. And that's one of those dichotomies in life where two things that seem to be opposed can absolutely exist at the same time. Like, I get so stressed, but I love it. And I love that I'm facing up to all of those eating disorder voices in my head telling me all of those horrible memories, all of those, the numbers, the calories, all of the things that I committed to memory from such a young age, and all of those stresses, all of those punitive voices, and I'm sticking two fingers up at them and saying, I hear you, and I'm not gonna react to you. I'm going to do this, and it's a challenge, and I've set my mind to it. It's going to be euphoric when I actually take my time to breathe through the anxiety, sit down and enjoy this food and celebrate that. And I've also been reminded, because I'm in lockdown with two flatmates, I've been reminded that not everybody understands that. So they now know that I get quite touchy when I'm cooking. But the tool belt, just to make sure that I've not missed the most important one, getting help from professionals when I need it. And I have a therapist that I turn to. I've also turned to caring friends who have mental health experience themselves and who aren't afraid to be really honest with me and ask the difficult questions. And I've been reading a lot more like books that have been recommended to me by my therapist, by the friends who are on similar journeys. And yeah, sometimes just connecting with a wider group of people, whether that might be on via Instagram or Twitch or anywhere really. Social media in general can be a good place to be. But yeah, there's I think, I mean, there's loads of other things. There's loads of therapy phrases. Oh, I've started writing on post-it notes affirmations and putting them on my mirror on my bathroom.
Great. I do that too.
It's,
Too. Leading up to exams, like especially like my most stressful times, I always like literally from A levels, and I'm now about to finish medical school, I always have like an affirmation up by my mirror.
I really love, like, I've got this kind of wall of color because they're all different colors and with all of these different affirmations. And it's great because I might resist them when I first write them down or first put them up, and it doesn't feel like I can hold on to it. But then it gradually seeps into your grey matter. And then at some point, I'll be like, oh, I'm struggling with this. And then this little thought will just come out and I'll be like, that fits, that really fits. And it's not magic, it's not a cure. But recently, my therapist and I have kind of identified a couple of them that have been really quite transformative for me, about misplaced responsibility and misplaced shame in my life. And the fact that I struggle to self-care quite a lot. But that's partly because I think for some people it wasn't modeled well as you're growing up. So learning to self-care is a whole, I mean, that could be an education in itself. And I too share your frustration that I'm very frustrated that the funding isn't there for education, because I've done workshops for schools and workplaces, but there needs to be funding for it to be able to
come in. It can't just be thought leaders like yourself. And I spoke to Hope Virgo a couple nights ago.
Hope's great.
It is amazing that you guys take this responsibility on when you're still in recovery and you're educating us, but it is just such a shame it's not part of standardized mainstream education, so it doesn't have to be on the shoulders of those that are still working on themselves. And it's amazing that you can take it on, but it's not, it should be more sustainable, more widespread.
And it really should be, and I would like it to be. And I think that because prevention is better than cure.
Yeah.
And especially with eating disorders, and it is Eating Disorders Awareness Week, the likelihood of long-term recovery, the likelihood and the probability of that is strengthened so much from early intervention. And the earliest intervention is prevention. So educating children not just in how to manage their mental well-being, how to look after, how to look out for their mental well-being, but also nutrition. I think if they could be taught, I think a big part of my
dream, you're speaking.
Well, a big part of recovery has been learning about nutrition, and learning how to enjoy food and how not to be as frightened by it or feel as powerless around it. So it's empowerment, really.
And very sadly, we only have around 15 minutes left before Instagram kick us off. I know it's very frustrating. But I just wanted to ask you, because I think it is so unique, your experience, that you've kind of experienced the flip side of the same coin, with the two ends of the spectrum with disordered eating, from anorexia nervosa to binge eating disorder. And I just wanted to ask you if you feel that people, from strangers to your family, to your friends, and to healthcare professionals, if they have treated you differently when you were one versus the other, and how can we do better with both? Because at the moment I'm having conversations with Hope around raising awareness around eating disorders, and then on the other end of the spectrum I'm having conversations with a wonderful GP who's fighting weight stigma. Her name's Fat Doctor UK on Instagram, Natasha Lamy, and she's fighting weight stigma. And it just seems fascinating that both ends of the spectrum we're not doing good enough, and you've experienced both, so I wanted to hear what you have to say about it.
For sure. I mean, I feel very passionate about it. So passionate that a few years ago I got an Arts Council grant to mean that I could do a social experiment, and we used hidden cameras to film my experiences of using prosthetic makeup to change the way that I looked for 1 week. Every single day I appeared to be a different person in a different body. and we filmed people's reactions to me,
Wow.
because I was the same person on the inside, acting the same, but just looking completely different, and that was all born from my experience of being underweight with anorexia, and then now I've said previously overweight or obese. Now I've been corrected, and I'm glad that people are coming forward to say that obese is now, I believe it's not the correct term to use. I think the word fat is brilliant, and the last few years there have been so many campaigners who've come forward to educate everyone about how fat is empowering if that is the body that you feel empowered to be within, and that's awesome. Like, do it, don't be afraid of it. That's great. It's so much better health wise to be a little bit overweight than a little bit underweight. And it's also wonderful to see the conversation changing around fat phobia as well. So I think that the education that I'm getting at the moment is all about, I'm reading about how the relationship with racism and fat phobia as well, which I'm fascinated by, and it's just, I love that the conversation's moving on. Having been both ends of the weight spectrum, but weight is, firstly, most importantly, weight is not the most important symptom of an eating disorder. I've also spent a being bulimic, and that taking a massive toll on me internally and psychologically, yet nobody knew about it because it's secretive. So you've got that shame spiral. But the way that people treated me when I was anorexic was, there was a lot of fear, a lot of staring, a lot of thinking it was attention seeking, misunderstanding it to be that, thinking that you can only be ill if you look ill. I remember that, but then I also got a lot more, even though it wasn't attention seeking, I received a lot more attention. Like, I received a lot more, people were scared and worried, understandably, because I looked very frightening to them. Then my on the other end of the spectrum, with the rapid weight gain, I felt like I felt completely powerless. I felt completely alone. I had no idea who I was. And my family just didn't understand why I couldn't stop eating. You know, it was all hours of the day and night that I was doing it. I was locking myself in my bedroom with a bucket rather than going to the bathroom, because I was just so scared of my own behavior. And the treatment, there was no treatment. The NHS, when I went to the ward, I don't know if this is still the same, but I went to A&E saying, please, I've made attempts on my life. Can I please help me? Please help me. I was put on a ward that had open access to the kitchen, where there was lots of biscuits and sugar, which is where I spent all the time that I was staying there, was just in the kitchen eating, and there was no regulation there. So I think the preconceptions, the misconceptions that people had were that my binge eating disorder was just a lack of willpower, which it absolutely wasn't. It's nothing to do with willpower. That I was doing it to myself. That I think that with the anorexic behavior, anorexia nervosa, there was a lot of fear and a lot of urgency, and with the binge eating, it was much more confusion and kind of being written off almost, of, well, if she can't, you know. And the bulimia was then something completely different, which wasn't spoken about openly, and even now I'm learning how to sit with saying and naming that that is experience for me. That is still an illness that I hear in my head, not like an audible hallucination, but as a disordered thinking way. And I think that, again, people have a lot of misconceptions around it, and again around being fat and weight and treatment with eating disorders. I think that it's so vital that people know that you don't have to have an eating disorder to have a certain weight. Like, if you're fat and you're happy and you're empowered by that, that's awesome. When I was overweight with binge eating disorder, it was a mental illness that was causing the weight gain, and I didn't feel empowered by it. I didn't feel like it was my body. I felt there was a lot of shame, and it was nothing to do with my body shape. or the numbers on the scales. It was
Yeah.
nothing to do with that. It was to do with the illnesses.
Sure. So no, context, what you've highlighted, context is so, so important, and that we shouldn't be making assumptions that just because someone looks a certain way that, you know, they're experiencing X, Y, Z. You know, we need to be able to inquire, and we need to be able to support people and realize that, you know, like you've expressed with binge eating disorder, it was psychologically rooted for you, and for many it is, and therefore there should be greater support and care. Sorry, I just choked there.
Okay, there was so much truth bombing coming out of your throat that your vocal
I just choked on my own saliva. My bad. Yeah, no, there should just be so much more support and care, and greater charity work as well, because, you know, there's so much charity work in the eating disorder space. But then what about, that's why probably, you know, the theme is binge eating disorder this year, because anorexia nervosa gets more attention than the other end of the spectrum, unfortunately, because the obesity public health campaigning stigmatizes it so much. So it's just really fascinating to hear from you. And for our listeners, is there any way they can watch the experiment that you did with the Arts Council? Because that sounds really interesting to see the reactions from people.
So the show itself is not currently available online. If you wanted to join me on Patreon, patreon.com/Juliette Burton, I release stuff about that show on there. There are on YouTube a few trailers that give you some clips from it. If you go to julietteburton.co.uk, then there's lots of information there. But I am streaming on Twitch at the moment, twitch.tv/Juliette Burton, and I will probably be revisiting some of those experiences back then. And the other places that you can go to watch me, not that particular show, but there's nextupcomedy.com/amazing Juliette. That's not what I chose, that's their Earl that they chose. But on there, if you subscribe, you get a discount using that Earl, and you can watch a couple of the shows I've done. I've done one all about how kindness can change the world, and I've done a defined show all about labels and how to break free from labels. I'm also doing virtual shows, so I'll be doing one on the 22nd of April. That's tickets are on sale now for at the moment. So yeah, if anyone wants to come and join me, that'd be awesome.
Amazing. Well, I was going to ask you, where can people see you, but you've answered it all, so that's amazing. And so just to finish off, can you just tell everyone what comedy means to you? You probably don't have enough time, I'm sure, because you found your purpose through comedy. And one of the things that I read about that you said, which I absolutely loved, is that the opposite of depression isn't happiness, it's purpose. And from hearing what you do and reading about you, really seems like comedy has allowed you to do that. So can you just quickly explain what comedy means to you?
Comedy means to me the ability to unite a crowd, and hopefully make them feel less alone. Like, the most important thing for me is I felt so alone when I was sectioned. I felt so alone in all of those years of darkness and difficulty. I felt like I had no voice. I had no one that would listen to a voice, even if I had a voice. And I want to think of that kind of person. There might be some people like that in my audience, and I want them to know that there is not only hope, there is laughter, there is positivity, and it's not toxic positivity. It's positivity that comedy has that ability to combine the hopefulness of finding the laugh and breaking that tension, but also acknowledging the darkness and saying, this is the reality of it, isn't it? Like, this is what I've been through, this is what I'm going through. And finding, like, training my mind to go towards the funny is a survival technique for me. So I love doing it. And even during lockdown, the best days have been days when I've been writing new material, to find something that, if we all know, if we laugh, it breaks tension. And mental illness does absolutely still cause a lot of people to feel a bit tense when they hear about it, and it's a way of letting people know, look, I'm okay with this, I've dealt with this, don't you worry, I've got this, we've got this together. And it's everything to me, comedy. I'm just can't wait to get back out into comedy.
I'm sure it's just not the same, is it, having a virtual audience? You need to buzz off their energy. I can't even imagine what it's like for performers. So frustrating, this Zoom life. But no, that was so beautiful. And yeah, the quote I used obviously for the promotion, it just made me laugh so much, you know, comparing all your different mental illness admissions to hospital to having to do TripAdvisor reviews at different hotels. It's, I mean, that makes it, you know, it breaks the tension already. Already I was laughing before even having a chat with you.
I mean,
You're so
I love that the ability to just let people know that this is my irreverent view on this. Okay, like it's not something to be scared of. There's nothing to be ashamed of. If we're laughing about it, then everyone, that's the cue to let people know. I'm okay with this. I'm not ashamed to bring this up. Let's talk about this. I'll talk about it for an hour with a microphone, and then you can ask me questions afterwards. That's fine by me. Yeah, I think there's another joke that I love, which is that for me, comedy's a way of finding light in the darkness. And when your mind can take you to dark places, it's vital to seek out the light. But that's also why I think that moths suffer from clinical depression.
And the need for your glitter, which I love. And lastly, where can people find out about your mental health campaigning work? I know you wrote a wonderful article for Rethink Mental Illness, and that you are an ambassador for Mind charity too, or is that
Rethink,
right?
Rethink Mental Illness is the one that I'm an ambassador for, but I work very closely with Mind.
With Mind, because you did your Edinburgh Fringe fundraising for Mind, didn't you?
I did, and I a lot of fundraising generally for Rethink.
Brilliant.
And I also do work I've done some work with Beat as well. I'm Sane. People can find out about my mental health campaigning mainly from my social media channels. So I'm at Juliette Burton on Twitter. I'm at Juliette_Burton on Instagram. On Facebook, it's Juliette Burton, writer performer. Yeah, I do talk very openly about the campaigning work on my socials. On my website, it's mainly about my shows.
Sure.
Yeah, and Rethink Mental Illness is the place to go to kind of, you can also Google Juliette Burton mental illness article. I've got some blogs coming out for very soon on new blogs recently, actually.
Keeping busy. Well, thank you so much. We're going to have to stop there before we get kicked off. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, and I loved our pink and yellow little outfits, brightening up everyone's evening. I'm definitely going to take a leaf out of your book with the glitter.
Get on it.
Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and for just being so raw and real. It's so helpful for everyone, I'm sure, listening, who maybe doesn't know enough about these subjects that we've spoken about today. And also for me, as someone who wants to be a future psychiatrist, I want to do right by people, and exactly that.
Thank you so much. And I'm so pleased that there are people like you who want to do that with their lives. So I'm fully here for that as well. Let me know how I can help in any way.